Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. People are starting to slowly trickle in, so we'll just give it a minute or two before we actually kick off. So we'll just give it maybe until 1:02 Eastern. Got around 20 attendees in the line right now, which is amazing to see. A couple of familiar names. All right, I think the numbers are starting to stabilize here. So we might go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everyone on the East Coast, and good morning to those on the West. My name is Damien LeBrock, and I'm a senior client partner here at Plative. I'm based in New York City, and I'm really happy and excited to be here walking you through this webinar. Over the last year, we've seen a surge in requests for organizations, especially community foundations, to learn how to better connect CRM and fund accounting, with the goal of creating a centralized source of truth for the entire organization. As a result, we've put together this webinar to highlight some of the ways that Plative is innovating for these clients, to demystify the idea that Salesforce and NetSuite are competitive platforms, and also to highlight the value of an integrated solution. To support and guide our conversation today, I've brought with me two individuals that come with a tremendous amount of experience in their respective technology fields. Sam Lim, based in Austin, senior Salesforce consultant, has been working closely with nonprofit organizations for over 5 years. And Sue Bouvin, based in Toronto, senior NetSuite consultant who leads our most strategic NetSuite implementation programs. So for a little bit about today's agenda, during the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to spend some time upfront introducing ourselves. For those on the call that we haven't yet had the pleasure to meet, I want to take this opportunity to thank you for giving us the opportunity to share with you a little bit about who we are and what we do. We'll then dive straight into our study of community foundations and the use case for digital transformation. During this section, we'll also introduce Salesforce and NetSuite and why we believe they can provide a connected business platform to drive growth and innovation at scale. Lastly, and probably most importantly, I'll pass it over to my co-moderators, Sam and Sue, to explore these respective platforms and to share insights into how to manage donor advised funds, atypical gifts such as stocks and fixed assets, grant management, and how to create a connected system of record by integrating Salesforce and NetSuite. We also have time carved at the tail end of the webinar for questions, so please don't be shy. We'll answer all the questions that we can. We're also going to be utilizing the Q&A functionality of Zoom webinar, and that'll be monitored by my awesome team. If anything's quick, we'll respond to it, or we'll pause the presentation and bring it up. Otherwise, we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end. So to start, we're going to do a little bit of an icebreaker poll here, and Michaela on my team is going to post the poll really shortly. Michaela, if you want to release that, amazing. So in order to guide this webinar and potential other webinars that we run around community foundations and digital transformation, we're curious and keen to learn from everyone on the line. So the question is, if you can extract one thing from today's session, what would it be? Okay, Michaela, let me know when these have started to come through. Okay. Fantastic. Okay, so with that, we'll keep moving. So a little bit about who we are and what we do. At Plative, our mission is to make a global impact by improving our clients' performance. We do so through providing advisory and implementation services led by industry consultants with deep expertise across Salesforce, Oracle NetSuite, Heroku, and Amazon Web Services. We were incorporated in New York City in 2014, and since then, we've expanded not only by geography, but also in our cross-cloud capabilities. To date, we've worked on over 2,000 engagements across a few primary verticals, those being nonprofit, financial services, high-tech, manufacturing and distribution, and professional services as well. Our clients really look to Plative to support them with anything from technology implementation, complex system integrations with one of these core platforms or adjacent tools, such as something on the App Exchange, and also general managed services projects and engagements. Regardless of where an organization is in their technology, whether they're on one of these tools or just wanting to learn about them, we're always open to a conversation, and we're confident in our ability to advise and solve for all complex requirements. So at this point in the webinar, we're going to really dive into our study of community foundations and how Salesforce and NetSuite can work together to give these organizations the infrastructure to innovate and scale at speed. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, over the last year, we've had a lot of conversations with community foundations about their administrative challenges with current technologies, as well as their strategic priorities to grow and to further their mission. First and foremost, one of the key things that we hear is that tools that are currently widely used in the market, like Blackboard's Razor's Edge and Financial Edge, Sage Intacct, Microsoft Dynamics, and Microsoft Great Plains, don't provide the extensibility to integrate with emerging technologies. As a result, opportunities for growth are often limited to the functionality of the platform. And if it's not supported in that integration, clunky workarounds are often implemented that create administrative burdens for staff. Second, given the complexity of needing a sophisticated CRM to truly understand the supporter and then empower staff with real-time financial investment information, having an integrated business platform is essential. Staff do need the ability to have information at their fingertips to inform strategic conversations and to maintain a superior level of customer service. Thirdly, complex gift management. Philanthropic models and the way that people give are ever evolving. Community foundations are the custodians of complex gifts and assets, such as, and not limited to, stock, cryptocurrency, LLCs, real estate, and many more. Having the flexibility, but also the rigor in a technology platform to administer fiduciary duty is paramount. Fourth, in order to provide fiduciary duty to donors, community foundations need a sophisticated financial accounting system to track cash and fixed assets in a single fund, view financial reports by multiple dimensions, and trigger the rebalancing of fees and journal entries on a scheduled basis. Lastly, giving the power to your people to automate their processes cannot be understated. By automating regular process and daily activities, staff have more time to focus on strategic initiatives and interfacing with supporters and grant recipients, really furthering the mission of a community foundation. And so the question is, why do organizations turn to Salesforce or NetSuite to solve for some of the challenges that have been highlighted today? The reality and the reason why is that a lot of the functionality that they're looking for is really baked in natively to both the respective platforms. And quite honestly, there is a bit of overlap between the two solutions. And that's where Plative really comes in to advise what should manage what. When it comes to these industry titans, Salesforce and NetSuite, the perspective we take is that we like to focus in on really what they're intended to do in the first place. So Salesforce, #1 cloud CRM solution in the market, Naturally, we think it's best to manage the relationship with customers and supporters. When it comes to the acquisition of net new leads or new relationships, how we go about the donor stewardship cycle, managing donations and awarding grants, Salesforce is best suited as the single source of truth for these administrative tasks. Conversely, when it comes to NetSuite being the #1 cloud ERP solution, we believe it's a phenomenal tool for managing revenue, dealing with complex billing requirements, managing vendor relationships, finance reporting, and fixed asset management. In the red section of this screen here, what we've highlighted are 2 recommended pathways to connect these platforms. And now it's safe to say that every integration looks different for every customer. And when we work with organizations, we typically want to try to understand the exact tables and the data that needs to flow between those platforms, the direction of the flow, either one way or two way. And then we make an informed decision whether it's best supported with a custom point-to-point integration, which Plative developers would build, or a middleware tool that is better placed to achieve the sync. There's certainly some benefits of the first, being that there isn't recurring costs that you have to incur year over year. It also allows for a degree of unparalleled control around the flow and the use case because it's being explicitly built for you. Alternatively, there are also benefits to exploring middleware as an integration approach, as middlewares tend to have pre-existing connectors that really simplify the task of connecting the 2 solutions. And because they're multi-purpose, it often gives you one centralized location to manage all integrations, not just between CRM and accounting, but potentially with other tools like GuideStar, financial aggregators, data lakes, and more. So I've done a little bit of talking there, and I know I've said a lot in a short period of time. I definitely want to pivot to the more exciting and more entertaining part of the webinar today, and that's going to be the demo of Salesforce and NetSuite. And I'm going to be reliant, as I mentioned, on Sam and Sue from here on in. For this demo, Sam and Sue will be highlighting fundamental processes in Salesforce and NetSuite to support constituent management, donor advised fund administration, and inbound and outbound transactions. Key to know, I'll just call this out, this demo is only going to show the 2 platforms themselves. And so the demo is really designed to illustrate how staff at a community foundation can streamline their operations by utilizing these 2 systems as a connected platform. So without further ado, Sam, I will pass it to you.
And I will go off mute. All right, folks, thank you so much for joining. Glad to see all of you here. My name is Sam Lim. I am a consultant here at Plative, working primarily with nonprofits, and just wanted to walk you through a presentation on how we're going to implement, or how we're implementing Salesforce and NetSuite together as an integrated solution for foundations. This presentation is going to be broken up into a few different parts. The first part is we're going to walk you through a story of a typical donor experience, how we manage our CRM, our CRM data with our donors, how they give donations, how we track the donations, and then how do we push that information over to NetSuite so that the accounting software can kick in and take care of that. We'll also walk you through the process of creating a grant as well and how that impacts the accounting. So there's going to be a lot of flipping back and forth, but it really just goes to show the extent of the integration of how we're going to pull these 2 platforms in together. All right, so let's start off with just the story part of it. So in Salesforce, and we're going to start off on the Salesforce part and then move over to NetSuite eventually. In Salesforce, at the very, very top level, we use an object called an account, and that's used to track any grouping of people. So this could be a household or an organization or a company. So in this example, we're using the account to track the Jameson household. And within a household, we can track the individuals. So we have Philip and Kelly rolling up into their household. You can also see that we've connected the 2 of them together using a relationship object called a spouse. So we can track relationships between household members and people outside the household as well. So moving forward, we can also use that same account record to track organizations, as I mentioned before. So here we can see that Philip is affiliated with Capel Consultants, and he is the CFO there. So these colored boxes that we draw in this diagram represent connectors. And so an affiliation is basically a connector between a contact and an account. A relationship is a connector between two contacts. So on this other side here, we can see that Kelly is affiliated or connected to the Louisville Fine Arts Institute. And with each affiliation, we can define the role that they play in that organization. So she is a board member here. We'd also like to introduce you to Carlos Gray. He is the advisor for Philip and Kelly. So as you can see, we can also use that relationship object to track relationships outside of the household. So here you can see we have an advisor-client relationship. Carlos also has an affiliation to his company called Palo Alto Wealth Advisors, and he is an advisor working for them. But I should also note that Carlos has his own household. So eventually, if Carlos becomes a donor, or if he eventually starts managing a nonprofit that's going to need a grant, we can track him there as well. All right. So whenever our donors enroll into our organization, we want to create a fund for them or multiple funds. So in this particular case, we have the Jameson Family Fund, and that's created to track all of their donations coming in. We can create one or multiple funds depending on our donors' requirements. And of course, we need to connect our donors to the fund. And so we use another connector object called a fund role to connect Philip and Kelly to this fund. And as you can see, we've designated Kelly here as the owner of the fund. And because she's the owner, she has a read-write access to this fund. Philip here is a representative, and he's gonna just need read access. So you can control the permissions that a person has to their fund. So whether or not they can update that fund or create a grant request. So those are all specific permissions that are associated with their fund role. Carlos, because he is an advisor, also has a fund role to this fund. Because he's going to be doing actions on behalf of Kelly and Philip, we definitely want to be able to give him read-write access to this fund. I should also point out that Carlos could also have his own personal fund as well. If he was a donor, we could set up a fund for him. And what we're trying to represent here is the fact that advisors have access to multiple people's funds. Some of them they might own, and others they might not own. So we have the capability of doing that. All right, so moving over to the donation side now. So now that everyone has their funds, how do we handle donations? So donations are tracked with two separate objects. We have an opportunity and we have a payment. The reason why we break this out is the opportunity is used to track the forecastable part of the donation. So in an example where you have more complex gifts, things like real estate, stock, or crypto, we think of those objects as simply just objects that hold value while they're in our possession, right? So if someone gives us a piece of real estate, we can't really do anything with it at this point. It just sits there holding its value. When we sell that piece of real estate, then we actually receive a payment. And that's when we can actually do something with that money. So think of the opportunity as tracking the object that is donated. And then the payment is the actual money or the revenue gained from the sale of that object. Now, in a really simple case, if someone just gives you cash or check, both of these objects are created at the same time, just to keep things simple. Once a donation hits our system, we definitely want to allocate this to a fund, because otherwise we wouldn't know who gets to spend that money and who gets to grant it out. So I want to introduce yet another connector called the allocation. And what this does is it says that any donation or any payment that comes in from this person is now allocated to this fund. Okay. And this can be done on multiple scenarios. We can also allocate one gift or one donation to multiple funds. There's a lot of flexibility with that. All right, so once this allocation is created, this is when we pass it over to the NetSuite side for all of the accounting. And in this allocation, we can capture any of the debit or credit accounts. We can also segment these allocations and tag them with cost center information, or if there's any restrictions, any type of information that has to do with accounting, we can encapsulate that in the allocation record and then push it over to NetSuite for accounting. At this point, I'd like to hand this over to Sue, and she can continue on the story with what happens on the NetSuite side.
Thank you, Sam. So here, you can see my screen. So next, once donation or gift syncs into NetSuite, it creates a fund if fund doesn't exist, or it just updates an existing fund. Now, and then the gift is allocated onto investment pools that is managed inside of NetSuite. And from here, based on the allocation requirements, and the investment allocation journal entries are created automatically. This will help us generate investment pool detailed reports that show fund allocation within each investment pool. And every month, when investment returns come from an external investment management application into NetSuite, based on the average balances and the investment pool details, NetSuite can create journal entries for allocations for sorry, I just lost my train of thought here, realized gains and losses for each fund. So there can be many more segments like restrictions, revenue type, and cost center, just like Sam said, and you can assign these segments to all transactions and run financial reports by these segments. There's going to be a fee schedule attached to each fund that details how fees should be calculated. Based on this fee schedule configuration, scripts in NetSuite is looking at average daily balance or net activity of a fund and calculates fees and also creates fee journal entries. Funds are rebalanced on a nightly basis by looking at the ins and outs of funds and creating rebalancing journal entries. Rebalancing journal entries, fund balances, the beginning ending balance of the day, and another related information syncs back into Salesforce and updates Salesforce fund record. Right, so now let's talk about grant process.
Thank you, Sue. All right, so now that we've rebalanced our fund, we've collected all the information from investments, any fees that have to be paid out, we now know the amount that we can actually grant out. So now it's time to actually make a grant. So in Salesforce here, we can start off by tracking all of the nonprofits that we want to grant to. So in this example, I have an account record created to track the Ballet Ensemble of Texas. And in similar fashion, we can affiliate a contact to this account. So we're using an affiliation connector here. And we have Tom Clower, who is acting as the artistic director for this organization. We should also note that Tom could also have his own household, his own family, and he could also be a donor as well. So what we're trying to show here is that contacts can play multiple roles. They can be advisors, they can be donors, they can be affiliates to different organizations. We don't want to put them in a single box. We want to be able to track our contacts who are able to be basically multifaceted. All right, so with any grant, we also want to make sure that we have a source for the money. So in this particular case, we have the Jameson Family Fund, which we had established in the prior slide. And at this point, we create the grant record. And now when we create the grant record, obviously the first step is to establish the funding source. So that's the Jameson Family Fund. And whenever you create a grant, it goes through multiple stages, and that allows our donors to see what stage or how much progress has been made on this grant. So in this particular case, we start off at a grant requested stage. All right, so our next step is then to attach any attachments, any documentation that is associated with this grant. And that's easily done directly and natively in Salesforce, or what we could do is we could pull in a third-party integration like Box to be able to store those files. The next step is then to link this grant to the actual recipient. So we are going to give this grant to the Ballet Ensemble of Texas, but we can also link it to Tom Clower as he's the primary contact. So he'll be the one that we're interfacing with during this granting process. Once we've established that information, then the stage can get updated to pending approval. And basically pending approval means that it needs to now go through the approval process where we're going to put it through a series of approval checks and balances to make sure that this is a legitimate nonprofit. And so we have an integration with a tool called GuideStar, which allows us to pull in IRS information for our nonprofits. So by searching by EIN or by name and address, we're able to pull in their status. We can also pull in NTE codes. And what we'd also do is assign a date or do a timestamp of the last time that we've approved this particular nonprofit. What that allows us to do is if we were to give future grants, if we had a recent approval for this particular nonprofit, we can waive all of these approval steps and we can just kind of fast track any future grants to this nonprofit. All right, so once we've done that approval, then obviously we're going to update this stage to awarded, right? And at that point, we're going to send a notification out to Ballet Ensemble and to Tom Clower saying, hey, congratulations, you've been awarded a grant. Once he accepts that grant, then we have to talk about creating payments. How do we pay this grant out? And so what we do is we create an invoice record in Salesforce. And this is what's going to encapsulate the information so that NetSuite can track the actual payments, track the credit and debit accounts, issue the checks, and pursue getting that money over to our recipients. So at this point, I'd like to hand it over back to Sue so she can talk about the NetSuite part.
Oops. In NetSuite, we are actually going to use the vendor process to complete the grantee and the grant payment information. So when grant information and grant invoice is synced into NetSuite, when the user is ready, they can actually create a payment record. And from this payment record, one can print a check from NetSuite or draw a report to send to a bank to print out the checks. Also note that NetSuite will calculate and store budget information for each fund by looking at the average balance of the fund or the net activity of the fund and the spending policy or the percentage limits that's attached to the fund for that year and calculate a spendable budget. This can drive actual versus budget reports in NetSuite. Yeah, I'm going to stop here. We're going to take a look at a demo in Salesforce and NetSuite.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Sue. All right, so now that we've talked about the story, you guys have a picture of what we're going to be demonstrating here in Salesforce. Now we're going to actually show you what these records or what this data looks like in the system. All right, so we'll start off on the Salesforce side. And here is an example of logging into a Salesforce instance. When you go to your home page, you're going to see a quick dashboard of just important information. And this is completely customizable. You can put up any dashboard or any report that you'd like. So here, an example, we have a pipeline for the next 4 months. We have any major donations that are in the pipeline to keep an eye on. We have also a list of our top household donors of all time and also our organization donors. So here we can see that Kelly and Philip have made our top list. So we're going to click onto their record and take a look at their household. When we get into their household, you can see all the detailed information about their family, or at least their household. We can see the name. We can see the primary contact. We can even specify the formal greeting and informal greeting. So this is in case we're emailing or mailing letters or information out to them, we can configure how we want to address them, and in a formal way or an informal way. Scrolling on down, we have addresses, and even though you're seeing one address here, we keep an entire history of all of their addresses. So let's say if they've moved 5 times in the last 7 years, we would have a history of every single address that they lived at. On top of that, we can track vacation addresses as well. So let's say they have a summer home between May and August, we can actually tag that summer home. So anytime we send a mailing out, if it's during those months, that letter will go to their summer address. Lots of flexibility there. If we scroll on down, we can see some information of their donation history. So we can see the first gift date, their last gift date, the last gift amount, so their most recent gift, or their largest gift. So we have all sorts of stats on their giving history. We can also see totals. So how much have they given over their entire lifetime with us? What was their best gift year, or how many gifts have they given in total? So lots of information. And again, this area is customizable too. I should point out that with the entire Salesforce platform, so much of this is customizable. You can present any field or calculation that you want. You can lay things out for specific different users within your organization to streamline their process and make things easy to see. I think a lot of times when we're doing implementations, people are coming from platforms where they're just presented with way too much information. And it's a nightmare just wading through the information that they need to get to. Or the converse side, where a page doesn't have enough information, so they're forced to navigate to multiple pages to get the information that they want. All right, so moving on then, let's go into, let's see, details. All right, so let's go into their grant history. So here on the account level for the family, we can see things like their giving history and their grant history. So I just wanted to point that out. All right, so then moving in, let's go back to, let's dive right into Kelly James in here. So after we've talked about the family, let's jump right into taking a look at a contact record. All right, so when we take a look at Kelly, you can see that she obviously rolls up to her family or her household, but you can also see that she's affiliated with the Louisville Fine Arts Institute. So here we're able to track the organizations that they are working with, affiliated with. Scrolling on down, we can also see details of her contact information. So things like phone number, email, so we can easily reach out to her. Again, she will have address fields as well. Now, these are basically synced up with the household. So wherever her household is, that's going to sync down to here. That's configurable, but by default, everything is synced within a household. Going down, we can see her individual donation information. So I wanted to highlight the fact that even though you're a donor within a family, you could be tagged with either hard credit or soft credit. So if you're the person signing the check, you get to have the hard credit. But if you're in the household, like Philip, if Kelly gave a donation, Philip would be the one to receive the soft credit. And so we see all sorts of information about that as well. Moving over to the next tab, under Kelly's contact, we can see all of her relationships. Now, these are relationships between her and organizations and her with other people. So at the very top, we see affiliation. So again, the Louisville Fine Arts Center, we can see that she's a board member and she's currently the board member. This is handy for tracking historical affiliations as well. If she was a former board member for a different organization or a former employee at a company, we would be able to see her history and track that. Similarly, we can track her relationships with other people. So here in this example, we can see that Philip is her husband and Carlos is her advisor. So lots of ways that we can track these relationships, hopefully building our network as we go. Clicking over to gifts and grants, we can see her donation history. So these are all the donations that her and her family have given. So we have a couple really simple cash gifts, but we have this $2 million property gift that came in as well. We can also see any grants that she's given out from her fund. So we have this particular one here for the BET summer program. All right, then we click into the funds. And remember, in our diagram at the very beginning, the Jameson family created their own Jameson Family Fund. And this is the place where all of their donations are gonna land. So this is what the fund record looks like. So if I click into here, we can actually open up that fund record. And we can see all the details about this fund. All right, so we have the primary owner, which is designated as Kelly. We have the ability to track any advisors who are associated with this fund. So Carlos here is tagged as an advisor. We also know that this fund is associated with their household. Now, if there was an organization, this could be an organization fund. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a household. It could be a company or corporation. It could also be another nonprofit who's created a fund here as well. We also track the type of fund this is. So this happens to be a donor advised fund, and every fund gets its own unique ID, which is important for tracking not just the fund here in Salesforce, but linking it over back to NetSuite as well. Scrolling down, we can see information about the fund, things like its balance, any fees to date, any investment gains to date, right? So these are all handy fields. What I should also point out that these fields are calculated in NetSuite. So whenever new donations come in or grants are issued out, NetSuite does all the math, calculates it, and pushes that data back in. So we have a nice up-to-date view of how much is left in that fund. We also can assign a spending policy. So in this particular case, we're saying, oh yeah, out of this fund, we're going to allow 20% of this fund balance to be granted out. So it does the automatic calculation, giving us a total of about $401,000 available for grants. Scrolling on down here, we can see any donation. So when we talk about gift allocations, these are gifts coming in and allocated to the grant. So we have about just a little over $2 million worth of gifts coming in, 3 gifts in total. And we can track things like the date, the largest gift, the smallest gift again. And then down at the bottom, we can see any grants that have been issued from this particular fund. So here we can see that there was a single grant worth $1,200. All right, so let's take a look at, if we click in the Fund Administration tab, this is where we can see a handy list of all the people who are associated with this fund. So again, remember when we created those fund roles, giving people specific permissions to this grant or to this fund. We can see here that Kelly is the primary owner, Philip is a household member, and then Carlos is a primary fund advisor. So all of those are defined. And again, these will dictate their permissions on this fund. Very similar to a contact giving history and grant history, we can see the fund giving history and grant history. So these are all the donations that have come into this fund. And so you can see the totals, we can see the actual name of the opportunity. So if we wanted to click in and see those details, we could do that. So let's say if I clicked into this particular gift here, we can see that it's tracked in an opportunity, and we can see the amount is just a little over 2 million. We can see the date that it closed. We can also scroll down and see information or details on this particular gift. So this was a piece of property. We can paste in information from different vendors. Zillow is this example. We know that the fair market value for this gift at the time of giving was 3 million, even though we only sold it for 2. So there was a little bit of a loss on this property, but we can track all of that here. Okay. On a more simplified gift or a simple gift, let's say just a simple cash gift of $5,000, if we were to click into this, it's just really basic. It's just the amount, the close date, right? We can also see that the payment was created right away, and the payment was the same amount as the actual gift. We click into the financials part. This is where we actually allocate the gift to the fund. So here's where we say all 100% of the $5,000 is allocated to the Jameson Family Fund. So now this will update the total on this fund. So at this point, we hand this information, this allocation record, over to NetSuite so that it can take care of the accounting element. So at this point, I'll hand it over to Sue, and she can walk you through what it looks like on NetSuite. Oh, you're on mute, Sue.
There. So I just want to walk you through the very basic, the constituent record inside of NetSuite, and how NetSuite handles this. Because there's a lot of information in Salesforce, we are only going to bring into NetSuite what is required for your transactional financial reporting. The basic constituent record inside of NetSuite can hold relationship information as well as household information. Also under their giving summary, you can see their contributions by year, and there are other reports as well. You can also see contributions by fund, all of that information. All of this is, of course, calculated real time and updated on the constituent record real time. Here we are looking at Philip's record, but there's also Kelly's record. It's very similar, same record, they're just connected by the relationship. I'm going to dive into the fund record here. The fund record in NetSuite now, this is highly configurable. We can add more fields, more reports to this if you want to go to a fund record and just view all about that fund in that record itself. As you can see here, there's the name. There's other segmental information if you want to tag a fund with that. I have a fee code here. There's also a link to the Salesforce fund record in NetSuite. This is so for the users that have access to both Salesforce and NetSuite instance, they can actually click on this and they could go into the Salesforce record and view the fund record in Salesforce. Note here under the donation sub-tab, I have many sublists detailing all the ins and outs of the transactions that's coming in and out of fund. So this is the net asset, but we can break it down and show all the transaction that's actually happening. So there's some donations, we've set up budgets, there's other journal entries, fees, all sorts of things that's happening. So you can actually get a detailed view of all the transactions in the fund record itself. Further to that, we also break it down by the different types of transactions. So here's the journal entries. There's a fees entry, the donations that came in over time for this fund, the budget that we had set up for this at the time the fund was created, the investment allocation itself. Now, this here shows that this particular fund is to be allocated between these three types of investment pools. And so as the fund gets revenues or there's realized gains or losses from investment returns, whatever it is, this allocation is going to be referenced, and the new funds will be allocated accordingly. So this is the fund record. I just want to take a quick look at the donation as well that actually brings the funds into the fund. This is a donation record inside of NetSuite. So you can see there's Kelly attached to the donation and the amount, as well as any other segmental information that you need. So now with this information, I can run other financial reports by department, by restrictions or fund or anything else that we are actually adding to this transaction. Right. I'm going to stop here and we're going to talk about grants a little bit.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Sue. All right, so here I'm showing you, if you all can see the screen here, our nonprofit that we're going to be granting to. So they are the Ballet Ensemble of Texas. And again, we're using that account record. So very similar to an organization, to a household, we're able to track information about them. What I wanted to point out to you is that we have an automation that can automatically pull in information from GuideStar. And so this pulls in information about the organization itself, the principal officer, their website. It'll also pull in things, financial information like gross receipts, assets. This allows us to be able to pull in and do an actual validation to make sure that this is a legit nonprofit. And we're able to see that, yes, we can grant to them and make that determination. So as part of that approval process, I imagine that this would be a big step or a major key component of that. So then going back into the actual act of creating a grant, let me show you what that grant record looks like. So if we click into, so again, navigating back to the Jameson Family Fund, and we go to the grant history, we can see the list of grants that have been issued out. So here is one that we issued for the Ensemble Summer Program for 2021. And so you can see with every grant, we designate where the money is coming from. So from the Jameson Family Fund, we designate the recipient organization, which is Ballet Ensemble of Texas. We also know who the primary contact is, Tom Clower. We also know the family or the organization who's giving this grant and the contact associated with that. And on top of that, we know the advisor who is part of that deal as well. We know that status has been awarded, and we also know the amount. As part of the due diligence, we also want to make sure that the fund has enough money to be able to support this grant. So this is an automatic calculation that pulls the value from the Jameson Family Fund. And this tells us that, yes, there is enough money. 401,000 is definitely enough to grant out this grant. And if that wasn't enough, we can also show a little calculation just to say that, yes, it's true, we have enough money. So there's a couple ways to just double check to make sure, because the worst thing is to be able to issue a grant and then all of a sudden realize, hey, we can't afford this. And then later on, once the grant is actually dispersed, we track all that information here. So the date that the checks were issued, all of that will get pushed back from NetSuite. And so over to you, Sue, to talk about what this grant looks like on the NetSuite side. Oh, you went back on mute.
Here's the grant record. Am I muted again? Because I'm getting that.
You're good.
Okay. The grant information can come from Salesforce into NetSuite. And Jeremy, you had a question about the dates. Yes, we can bring in the dates as well and store the dates in Salesforce. At the moment, I don't have any dates here, but you can see there's a date field. There's many date fields, and if it's not here, we can actually create that one as well. So yes, this is the grant information. There's a total amount attached to it. From here, NetSuite, we're going to leverage, like I said, the vendor bill process in NetSuite. So we've created a vendor bill assigned a grant expense item to it, account to it, and the fund, and there's the amount. Now this will be paid off, and once this is paid in NetSuite, you do have the functionality to come and print the checks, like I'd mentioned before. So you just come, click, create the check, or print out a report that looks like this to send it out to your banks. Once all this is done, of course, the good thing about NetSuite is all the financial reports. So I'm going to just show you here an income statement by fund. Now, depending on the type of segments you're running, so this could be a P&L by department, P&L by restrictions, you have a very similar layout. You can see the P&Ls for each fund between these periods for the different subsidiaries that you might be managing. So this is one kind of reporting. There's also budget versus actual. Now this is a report that shows budget category by funds, and I have the budget amount, the actual amounts, and the amount over budget, and NetSuite also calculates the % of budget. All reports and safe searches in NetSuite are also customizable, and we can actually schedule to push data from NetSuite into Salesforce as well. Okay, let's stop right here.
Awesome. Great. Thanks so much, Sue and Sam. That was amazing. Just quickly, I know we are at time for the 45 minutes. If anyone needs to jump, that's okay. We'll be sending out a recording of the webinar later this afternoon or early tomorrow. So you'll have that. But for those that can stay on, we're going to work through a couple of the questions. So the first one that came in through the chat was from Greg. And it said, do you often see the use of iPaaS platforms for integration, and what would drive that kind of use case? Sam, I think that might be one for you.
Yeah, I can take that one. Yes, absolutely. So iPaaS solutions have been fantastic. I think the main advantages that they bring to the table is that you don't necessarily have to create your own custom integration. And then on top of that, you don't have to maintain it. We let these organizations take care of all the nitty gritty details. And what we do is we set up that integration. So yeah, the benefit there, I think, is being able to have another party manage that and maintain that link for you. The downside, of course, is additional cost because you're now paying a monthly or an annual fee to maintain that, but I think it's worth it. Those types of functions are all very mature at this point. So we use a combination, and we have expertise in-house for things like Dell Boomi, Jitterbit, MuleSoft. We've done those types of integrations before. They're extremely powerful platforms. They allow you to do either a scheduled sync or a real-time sync. They also allow you to define what fields get synced over. And if there's any logic, if then do this, that type of logic, you can also define those in those platforms. So very, very handy, very powerful tools. So I tend to prefer that as opposed to a custom build. I tend to recommend that. But I think one of the main deciding factors is budget and timeline, how quickly you need this turned out.
Great. The next question that's come through, and this might be a quick one, but Aspet has asked if advisors have access to multiple clients' accounts.
Yeah, so advisors would have access to the funds, not their accounts. So, and but again, with Salesforce, that's completely configurable. So in this particular example, we only gave advisors access to the funds that they have access to. The reason why is we want to be able to monitor and govern tightly the control. I don't want an advisor coming in and changing somebody's phone number or address without actually having authorization to do that. But different organizations might have different rules. They might have different relationships with those advisors. So completely customizable. And that's one of the beauties of Salesforce is we can build something very, very custom to you and your organization. We would start off with a bare configuration similar to what you're seeing today and be able to customize it for you.
Thank you, Sam. Another question that's come up, and I think it's a really important thing for us to discuss, and it's really around external users getting access to the system. So this one comes from Joyce Ray. The question is have we built any tools for external users, fund journals, DAF grant suggestion, nonprofit grant applications, and what would be additional integration products?
Right. So the most common one would be using Salesforce's built-in Experience Cloud, formerly known as Communities. What this is think of it as a portal. So all of that stuff that I just showed you on Salesforce, that's for internal users. But what you can do is you can select certain objects and certain fields within that object and expose them to your donors or your advisors. And that is what we call the portal. So let's say an example is we took that fund record and we said, we want to expose just the name of the fund, the balance, et cetera, and we'll give our external users access to that. And then what we can do is turn on that portal, give people access so they'll have their own login. They'll be able to log in and see this information. They'll be able to suggest changes to it. If we wanted to, and depending on your organization's rules, we could also give them access to actually update their own information. So let's say somebody moved. Instead of having to call somebody in your tech support line and say, hey, can you please change my address? They can log into the portal, update their own information. In the same way, they can also do grant recommendations from their portal. So they'd be able to fill out a form, say, yes, I would like to give this amount of money to this organization, and push it through an approval process. So your internal users would then see this recommendation request, do the validation, grant the approval. So many ways to do that. Again, very customizable to your organization's processes and flows.
Okay, and I think we've probably just got time for one more before we wrap. So Sue, this one's more of a NetSuite question, but it's, can you establish budgets for projects by department or fund or other segments in NetSuite?
Absolutely. So actually you can set up budgets for even donors for all segments and projects and for any accounts. So NetSuite gives you that access.
Okay, and one more quickly. Last one that came in from Toad around wire or sending ACH payment.
So NetSuite does handle ability to wire or send ACH payments right out of NetSuite. And if needed, that information can sync back into Salesforce. So that's a simple question. I'd say yes.
Awesome. All right. So I want to just take this quick opportunity before we wrap here to thank Sam and Sue for leading the demonstration today. For our audience, these are the geniuses at Plative. They make my job really easy. So thank you so much for your time and effort. For everyone in the audience on the line that's registered, thank you so much. This webinar will be packaged up and sent out to each of you. I know there was a couple of questions about that in the Q&A chat. And more broadly, we'll follow up with this with some information and details about with contact information. If you have any questions, more than happy to jump in onto a call to have more of a conversation around your specific use case and what's driving the change at your organization. More than happy to have any conversation regardless of where you are in the technology journey. So with that, I will say thank you very much and wishing you all the best rest of your day.
See you all. Thank you.
Thank you.